Our speaker tonight is Meg Baker, and she will be talking on hidden items, and she'll explain more about that, but there are items that we either knew we had or couldn't find or didn't know we had at all and found them. And this was through a CPA grant. Meg is our curator, and she's a volunteer curator at the Greenfield Historical Society, consultant at the Pioneer Valley History Network, and any more accolades you want to add? I'll let you add. Okay. Here she is. There's Meg.
All right. Good evening. How's this for sound, John? Good. All right. I'm Meg Baker. I'm the curator of the Hatfield Historical Museum. It's one of the 2 museums the Historical Society administers in Hatfield. Thanks for being here tonight to hear about one of the major projects of the past year. Found in collections. First of all, a note of gratitude. This wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Hatfield Historical Society, the Hatfield Community Preservation Act Committee, the town of Hatfield as an entity and as people. So nothing happens in a vacuum, especially a project like this. Applause is good. Thank you for clapping. So how this all began, it started with cards. All kinds of cards covering decades of donations. There were handwritten cards, typed cards, index cards, just a lot of cards. Hatfield has always collected antiquities, and in 1894 they even built Memorial Hall to safely store them and show them off. The museum part was downstairs, where the library is now, and the upstairs, where the museum is now, was the library. And at some point they switched. At least some of these labels had stayed attached to the items. The written or typed or tied bits of information continued with the item to carry the story forward, but not all of them. So this commemorative program, by the way, right here, let's see if my mouse cooperates. Yeah, well, on the left there, that commemorative program is the dedication of Memorial Hall, and it was the 75th hidden item that we found back in July of 2022. All right. Some of the old labels still exist, but the earliest record book we have is from the 1970s, when the Hatfield Historical Society, as it exists in this time, was organized by members such as yourselves. The newer book is on the right, and it covers the period from 1995 to 2007. And at that time, items that were loaned or donated were recorded by hand. And in about 2010, it became evident that there was a need for a digital method to track the collection. And that is when Hatfield made a big investment in its future. The town of Hatfield, through the CPA, funded a major inventory project, including entering important data about every item in a searchable database. The Community Preservation Act Committee grants approved by town meeting in 2012, 2013, and 2014 took the collection to a whole new level. Former curator Kathy Gow. At this point, we should all applaud. and a series of able assistants worked for years to get items documented according to best modern museum practices, including who donated them, the size, the age, and condition of each item, the storage needs, and other information that came along with each item. These binders, which some of you have seen in years past, hold printouts of that database. It is always good to have a paper record One of my mentors in museum work is fond of saying, digital is forever or for 10 years, whichever comes first. So printouts are good. I started working on this project in 2015 as Kathy's assistant, so a good portion of what's in those binders after 2015 I may have helped create. Oh, sure.
What's the total number of items?
Currently we are at 5,182, I think. Whoop. Oh my goodness, I skipped a slide. Forgive me.
And
No
all
wonder.
All the items have a direct history to the town?
Yes. That's part of our collections policy, is to make sure that we're actually telling the history of Hatfield. And well, some of the old, okay, we did that. All right, good. Liz, you threw me with that question. It was a good question. We started with the biggest items because they were easiest to see. You know, if you're looking around a room and you're trying to create an inventory, one of the things that happens often in museums when they're being handwritten is that someone stands there and says, clock, and writes that down. Chairs, and writes that down. So when we were creating the inventory, starting with the biggest items made sense. So this is the 6-foot-tall official 1850 town weights and measures case with all of its accoutrements. And from that down to the little 1-inch Teamsters pin from 1970, we museum staff focused on getting items identified and entered into the database. And by 2019, we had over 5,000 items that had been identified, photographed, and entered in a searchable record. We knew we were closing in on the initial goal of a complete inventory. Then in 2020, as we all remember, the museum, along with everything else, closed due to COVID. So in the summer and fall, with the museum closed, staff kept working, but with just one person in the building at a time. It was slow going, and we used a lot of Post-it notes and shared Google Docs and texting and other methods to stay on track. But there is an advantage, a silver lining. With everything shut down, with no programs and no visitors, we spent a lot of time working in that database, and it was a great way to proceed. We were aware that we were looking at an updated database very soon, so I combed through every single record to find any gaps in the numbers, and that's where we discovered these hidden numbers. We referred to the original handwritten record books, which had been transcribed by Wonderly Stouter into Excel spreadsheets in 2015. Wonderly, thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. Looking at that comparison between the original record books and what we had in the existing database, we found 441 items that were listed in the 1970 to 2007 records that we had missed. They were hidden. We knew we had record of them, didn't know where they were. Oh, see, this is the, come on, do the thing, go back, there they are. Oh, gosh, get them in line. So this is one of the things that Bob alluded to earlier, or said earlier, that we had a storage issue in town. In early 2021, Kathy Gow and I put together a proposal to find those 441 remaining items. The CPA and town meeting approved the Hidden Items project to start in 2022. But at that time, 1 year ago, like when we were here at the annual meeting last year, the collection in Hatfield was, for the Hatfield Historical Museum, was spread out between Benson's self-storage, which held most of the hard goods, which is a physical object that is not textile, basically. All of the textile goods were over at 5 College Annex, and a lot of other goods, mostly architectural fragments and like big chunky things, were in Town Hall, and then Memorial Hall holds the archives, mostly paper goods, smaller goods, that sort of books and letters and that sort of thing. So finding the hidden items would mean looking through every single box in every single location. So this created a bit of a conundrum. Also, this picture on the top, that was the storage unit. There was no functional space there to work. So this was a big thing. And all of these sort of off-site places was supposed to be just a short duration, but the pandemic led to a much longer time. So it was quite an interesting situation. Then, now we get to Benson's, or to Diamondback. So the town realized, and the Historical Society realized right away, that this was a major conflict to have all of these pieces of the collection scattered throughout the town. And this realization led to a major and amazing coordinated effort between the Hatfield Historical Society, the Hatfield Historical Commission, the town select board, and the town at large. And it came to be that we secured storage for all of the items that were stored outside Memorial Hall to be collected in one place. It has excellent security, it has good climate control, there's great light, and critically, there's space to open every box. The collection moved to Diamondback in stages over the second half of 2022. Meanwhile, we kept working. We didn't wait for everything to be in one place. We had plenty of boxes to work with at Memorial Hall. We started with those boxes on June 6th of last year, and on the very first day, we found this. This is the original document announcing the opening of Smith Academy. Isn't that cool? So it was very, very rewarding to find at the bottom of a box of other things that we had entered into the system, this one little piece of paper that had been missed. And there it was on our hidden items list. Super excited. I literally have chills. Get excited about history, sorry. With the details of the big move underway, Susan Donnelly came on board to help with the hidden items project. A great deal of what Susan did, her focus primarily, was in looking through all the old correspondence and old minutes from the Historical Society and internal notes and memos from prior people who were involved with the collection, and all of those bits to uncover how various items arrived in Hatfield. Some of the items on the hidden items list, we don't have that sort of provenance for, but Susan was invaluable in digging through all of the details and unraveling the threads so we can make sense of this. And this revealed a lot of new information about donors and dates and directions that the donors wished us to take. It really helped in the search. It's very easy for pieces of paper or pieces of information to get a little bit lost in the shuffle, especially if there's a large or complex donation offered, or if there's any delay in processing that donation. Finding a little booklet at the bottom of a box of little booklets is very straightforward. Sometimes the path is much more complex, like this wooden butter churn without a dasher. That's the buddy right there, wooden churn. So in 1970, this was listed as item number 127, and it was not showing up in the database. It was sitting right there in the museum, but it just had gotten missed. So the question I had to ask was, is that from the 1770s? Or was it an 1870s colonial reproduction? Or a 1970s bicentennial piece made using old techniques? I was fascinated, and the original record gave us a clue. So The long-handled frying pan, I wish I had a pointer, but long-handled frying pan, the handmade grater, and the sifter are all colonial-era kitchen tools. And there is clear precedent in the original handwritten record books where a donor's name is entered at the top of a list of items that they have donated at the same time. You know, if someone comes, it doesn't always hold, so it's been a puzzle. But if there's someone who comes in and donates 5 annual programs from Smith College, you know, graduations, sometimes it's very clear and they write the name each time, but later on, they don't want to write the name all the time. But here it seemed very clear. And in the record for the frying pan, there's this note. Seth Kingsley was the name of Seth W. Kingsley's grandfather and great-grandfather. So that was a fantastic clue. The Hatfield Veterans Gravesite Project was completed by Jeremy Bolduc in 2000, I believe as a Eagle Scout project. And what it does is note the gravesites of all veterans in Hatfield. It has a lot of information, and it had this entry. Kingsley, Seth W., born 1844, died 1930, Civil War veteran. So now we have a name and a date. And with that, I can take that information to Find a Grave, which is an amazing website. It's a fantastic tool for helping trace genealogy because it has pictures of each grave site and connects to who their family is. If it's known, if it's in the grave sites. So, this is an image from Find a Grave. This is Seth W. Kingsley. And following the family through the grave sites, we find 3 Seth Kingsleys connected with Hatfield. And Seth W. Kingsley, who is the son of Moses and Rachel Curtis Kingsley. Moses is the son of Seth and Lemura White Kingsley. And that second Seth is the son of Seth and Irene Warren Kingsley. So the colonial kitchen tools donated by Seth W., Civil War veteran, very likely belonged to his Revolutionary era great-grandparents, Seth and Irene Kingsley. So that Seth Kingsley was born in 1765, and Irene was born in 1766. Both of them were old enough for the Revolutionary War in 1776 to make a very deep, lasting impression on them in their 10 and 11-year-old selves. And that became a defining event in their formative years. So household items that connected the Kingsley descendants to that period became family heirlooms. So from this we infer that this is his great-grandparents' Civil War era butter churn. Yeah, I thank you for the wow. That's what I thought too.
How was it labeled previously? Did it have any?
It had a little label on it. On the side it says wooden churn.
That's it.
Yep. And there's a couple labels, there's other tags on it that direct me to a couple other places where at times in the past items had been looked at for different reasons. So I could piece together other bits that corroborated this. So not all the pieces are that complex. The butter churn was right up there. Sometimes it's as simple as a misplaced tag, which is why your question is so good. What happens when an item and a tag and with its number are separated? Sometimes it gets a new number. So adhesive stickers sometimes wear out, thank goodness. Tags get removed for exhibits, slips of paper, accompanying items get lost, and it's all human people. So anytime someone is handling something and they don't know that someone else has already started writing that item up or whatever, that happens. It's just human. So this set of books was donated by, this name, Mary Pilchta, correct me if anybody knows. No? Okay. So sometime prior to 1990, she donated these books, this pair of books. It was renumbered twice, in 1992 and again in 2001. So this would be so easy. On the left, that's the front of one book, and on the right is the back of another book. I definitely can see where someone would write the book up on the right as book, Knowles Loom Works, weaving machinery, and then the record would be completely gone, missed, wrong from what it is, which is book 2 of a two-part volume of wool dyeing. So that's how that happened. The candlesticks were donated by J.H. Sanderson, who was very good about sticking very stubborn labels with his initials on everything he donated. But it didn't have the number with it, so you can see on the inside of the candlesticks, anything with this little red outline, it says JHS, and we absolutely know that was his. So that was good. They'd been around since the opening of Memorial Hall. They were the 25th item, numbered in 1970, but they were renumbered in 2016 because there was no number label on them, just his initials. The gas mask, in the bottom corner, was donated by Jonathan Bardwell in 1984, but it wasn't numbered until 2016. It spent years on exhibit. It came in, it went on exhibit because it may have come in on request. Oh, we're doing an exhibit on World War II. You know, Jonathan donated this gas mask. It went right on exhibit, stayed in for a couple years. By the time it came in to actually be processed in, there was a different system, computerized system, showed up as a missing item. And these pictures are a huge part of what makes this inventory project so worthwhile, because now we know which candlesticks we're looking at. We know they all have numbers and records and photos. Come on. Yes, you may ask another question, Liz.
How many things did you say were missing?
In our original numbers that we originally thought as missing items was 441 lines. So when I went through all the prior database and was catching those gaps in the record, I was entering them into an Excel spreadsheet, and I had 441 lines. However, in a few of those lines, it just said large gap. So we've actually found over 500 items because some of those places where there was a larger gap, exactly. So in some cases now we know significantly more about these items, including donors, makers, and family connections. So the blue and white quilt here was in the database as unknown. And through this project, we now know that this is the Tree Everlasting quilt that was donated by Anna E. Belden. This cape over here went from ladies' wool cape, donor unknown, to gentleman's cape, donated by Mrs. William H. Dickinson. The hatchet in the bottom corner there went from unusual hatchet to Cooper's hatchet, most likely donated by Alvin Sanderson. And the most likely there is an inference based on other items that came in right next to that were named, that we infer that this was an assortment of farming tools, cooping, specifically barrel making Cooper's tools that were donated by him.
So what's the details of the history
Of the cape?
Yeah.
So the cape is from 1830, and it is a gentleman's winter cape. It's 2 layers of wool. It would have been quite cozy and also worn over an overcoat over a vest. The collar is velvet, and there's some bit of it's cotton velvet, and then there's some bit of padding or lining underneath that. The back of the collar has been repaired with a different, or faced with a different plaid. So one of the things that you can see in that is the economizing that the person who made this was doing. Textiles is my specific background, so I could go off on this.
So when you found out, did it look like that, or did you have it, conservation on it? Clean?
I have done, before we did the hidden items piece, when it was still Ladies Wool Cape, donor unknown, I had already done some textile conservation work on this because there had been some places where it was just very worn. And mostly what I did was to stabilize those pieces through to the inside, because the inside is a little stronger material. And we haven't had anything done since then, but it was one of the pieces that put it really high in my mind when I knew that there was a wool cape. And in the original record books, it's listed as it's specifically listed as a green and red plaid gentleman's cape. And we have no other green and red plaid cape in the collection, ergo. One of the things that's interesting about working in museum collections always is it's easy for us now to make sort of leaps into the past based on what is happening now for us. So we might look at that and think, yeah, someone did, it's a lady's wool cape. But in the 1830s, that's kind of a flash looking outfit for some gentleman to be wearing around in the, in the wintertime. So making those, thinking back about what the people were thinking and doing and using at the time is always a nice exercise. All right. So, some of the things listed in the 441 hidden items actually have been returned to people who had loaned them for an exhibit, an event, or a program. This was also really helpful because then we could know, oh, we don't have this. No, we don't need to look for it anymore. It's gone because it was transcribed by Wonderly and reclaimed, gone. A few of them, there's things that were loaned and then reclaimed, or things that had been loaned in 1910 and have now become ours, that sort of thing. So it's not complete yet, but we've done so much. It's so exciting to get so far. Some of the items have been transferred to the Farm Museum, which is, yes, that way. And if there were more, it was more appropriate there. If it was a larger farming item that really didn't fit as well with our collection. Or things that were deaccessioned as not actually connected to the history of Hatfields. The mission statement of the museum really is about telling the history of the town. So that's why the undated souvenir of the Declaration of Independence that had no known donor or story attached, that's been deaccessioned. We don't, that's the sort of thing we can all get now, and we didn't know who it came from or why. If we did know who it came from and it had a really good story attached, we might keep it. There's an item in the collection, this is not a hidden item, but I have to tell you about it because it's so amazing. We have in the collection a matchbox. A paper, like for kitchen matches, kitchen matchbox. Why? Al Rainey brought it in to Kathy and I. It's like, you gotta have this. We had an exhibit on toys in the museum at that time. He says, you gotta take this in, you gotta put it in the exhibit. Why? And he told us the most wonderful story about growing up in Hatfield as a little kid where you would wait eagerly for your mom to use the last match, because then you could take that matchbox and you could put a cricket in it. You could put bottle caps on the outside, then you got a car. And he said the best thing was that you could pretend it was a camera. And that he said kids would line up to stand and get their picture taken with the matchbox. And that turns what ordinarily we would have said, why? Into something that is such an important piece of oral history and a Hatfield childhood, we had to say yes. So if we had a really good story that went with the undated, copy of the souvenir copy of the Declaration of Independence, got it that time, then we might have kept it. But as it was, out it went. With the agreement of a committee that does this, it's not just me. We figured that there will be about 25 or 30 items left that are simply unaccounted for that we just cannot find, just because of the amount of material that we're looking through. One of the things that we will not be able to find, for example, is there's an item listed here that is photos of the 1936 flood with no further context or information, who took them, where. We just don't know. We don't know. It may have gotten rolled into one of the many, many, many other donations of 1936 flood photos, but we had to let that item go. Yeah, we're doing real good. Come on. If I can get my, I'll do it this way. This. All right, so now we're going to talk about this wonderful dress. So a collection is only as good as the information we have about it. And sometimes that information is recorded in bits and pieces, and it takes work to reassemble. So if you've ever been to the museum and talked for 3 minutes to me or Kathy or a couple other of you I see, or others before us, you know how eager people in a museum are for more information. So, hidden item number 474 so in that, I mean, it had the original number. In our 441 items, they weren't in order. So this was originally given the item number when it came in 1970, or was recorded in 1970, of 474, as the wedding dress of Angelina Waite, W.H. Dickinson's grandmother, donated by William H. Dickinson. So one of the steps in finding it was to think about what a wedding dress looked like in 1842 and stop looking for a white dress. Because Queen Victoria, when Queen Victoria got married in 1840, started the white dress fad. But it took a while. And we didn't have a wedding dress, white wedding dress. We didn't have a white dress that matched 1840 or 1842, but we did have this, and this is spot on for 1842. We had in the database this black and brown silk dress, and it was listed as donated by Mrs. W.H. Dickinson. Because that's another presumption we make sometimes, that if a dress came in, why would it be donated by William Dickinson? Because that bit that it was his grandmother's had gotten separated from the item. So we now understand that these are the same dress. There's also two pairs. Here's the piece of really strong corroborating evidence. The two pairs of dancing slippers that match the dress are listed as item 475, the next one, and they are in our in our database as donated by William H. Dickinson, Angelina Waite's dancing slippers. So we had this wonderful pieces to put together. So this project really revealed a bigger picture and more information on items throughout the collection. I'm particularly pleased with this one, though. So knowing what items are in the collection allows for much better management of the collection. It also allows for more mindful choices going forward to what to bring into the collection. So we avoid duplication and we gather in as many different stories as possible. So this project also helped reveal how actively the collection has been cared for, at least since 1970s, with items donated, loaned, reclaimed, transferred to a more suitable museum, very often the Farm Museum, but also all the neighboring towns. There have been times when someone donates an item, the they know doesn't belong to this town, but Hadley doesn't have an active historical society at the time. Or, you know, so there's been also this really wonderful collegiate experience between all the towns of going, oh, this belongs to you. And it helps build awareness of how interconnected all of our towns are. It also is wonderful to see that things have been deaccessioned if they are too far outside the mission of the Historical Society. And a refreshing reminder of the humanity of everyone doing this kind of work. And if the information isn't communicated and collected with clarity, the stories that can make these items so important is misplaced. So the work needs to be done carefully, slowly, with vigilance. So, where does that bring us? The next steps. With the impending completion of the CPA grant, and I expect this to be completed by the end of May, where we have about 10 hours remaining on the grant, which lets me just do the last bit. Like I said, we're gonna be 25 or 50 items we just can't find, but it's still rewarding when we do find one. So we now feel fairly confident that we have a full and complete inventory of the Hatfield Historical Museum collections. And this means a few things. It's a time to review what that collection actually is, and a chance to look at places that it might be good to focus collection efforts going forward to fill in underrepresented parts of Hatfield history, and an opportunity to plan programs, exhibits, and events with all the resources in the collection, as opposed to maybe missing some that would open up whole new pictures. I am very proud of this work and of this year. The Herculean work of so many people to secure really good storage and to shepherd all the moving parts, to bring all the offsite items back into one place it's a joy to work in. And the support and encouragement of the town, the Community Preservation Act Committee, and the Historical Society to complete this inventory, and their dedication to staff to do it. So this is why I wanted to be part of this project when I accepted the collections assistant position in 2015. It's why I accepted the position of curator last year, and I'm just really pleased to be here today. So thank you all so much. Okay, there's items here I'm happy to talk about, and I'm thrilled to answer questions if anybody has questions. Yeah.
How much percentage of all of the items the museum has is on display versus what's not on display?
Oh, I would guess, if I just go by like just a numbers thing, I would say that we probably have somewhere in the low hundreds of items on exhibit at any one time. And we have, you know, over 5,000 items.
Regarding the 5,000 items, I was going to say, is every item, those 5,000 items, are they just one item?
No. There's a whole bunch of the 5,000 records. I mean, I could pull it up, where I have something that's, you know, the item is 37 photos of the graduating class of Smith Academy in 1930, or 400 glass plate negatives, or a collection of baby clothes from the late 1800s. You know, so if we looked at every individual item, I don't think we would double the number, but it would come close. Kathy thinks it would be north of 10,000 items. That would be a fun project for some other time. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. Other questions? Yeah, John.
My name is John Pease, I'm part of the Board of Directors, also on the CPA committee. And we are always looking for projects in the historical preservation group, part of the grant that, you know, we as taxpayers support. But the little side stories, Meg always says, that I think it's the Kingsley glass photos side story. that originally he was a photographer, genius here in the valley, and his files and everything like that, his photos were eventually wound up with relatives that were here in Hatfield, eventually moved to Hadley, and eventually came back.
Yeah.
But the side story is one person found slides in the Hadley dump and knew something was good about it, brought them home, cleaned them up best he could, and presented them to a homeowner of the snapshot. So it's like, we throw away a lot of history, and we also should try to preserve a lot of history. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. I think we should stop on that. That was great.
Are you looking for, what type of items are you looking for the museum?
Oh, boy. Okay, so if you ask me, knowing the collection the way I do, the place where this puts into, you know, what gaps are in there. And part of it is, you know, that's something that I would need to consult with the board about. But the place that I look at is things post 1950, like, and even more so, like, we have some really great representation of the early eras of the town. We have great yearbooks through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. We have some amazing stuff of our veterans who have served during conflicts in that era, but not as much of, you know, what was happening in Hadley in in Hatfield. You confused me. In Hatfield in 1970. You know, I have my kids are 26, 23, and 17. And for a 17-year-old coming into a museum and seeing something from 1970 and knowing that's their parents' childhood, they love that. And what it does is it makes a bridge between now and history. You know, history back then. Because if I bring the kids in, or, you know, students or visitors or whatever, and we look at what's on the table here, and we have a wooden butter churn that's from pre-Civil War, a Geiger counter, some tickets to build a bridge, a very fancy fan, and a little bottle of Joe Curl wave set. 1950, see, 1950, but this is, see, right? This is the sort of thing that we want to be able to connect across, because the reason a town or anybody has a collection of historical items is so that we can know about the past to inform the present so we can plan for the future. And if you want kids to come in and understand the value of the past, they have to have a way to make that jumping point. So that's the thing that I, as a curator, look for, is how to make those jumping points so that I can get people that come in to connect something that's happening with their life now, or that they remember from their parents or grandparents, that gets them to these older pieces. You know, it's not that I mean, I love the older pieces, but I want to get them to it. You know, who has, or could find me a poncho, like a knit poncho from 1970? You know, wouldn't that, I mean, that would help a kid understand this a little bit. You know, it's that, bell bottoms, right? So that's the sort of thing. But it takes thinking about the museum collection as a whole piece. It takes thinking about what storage space we have. It takes looking again, which this project will allow us to do, looking again as a board and as the Historical Society, what is this collection? Where do we want it to go? What can we highlight best from this? So it's a great question.
Just following on that, I was thinking sometimes the things from that era, for instance, you know, photos or video records are just not so easy to, because those forms of technology have already gone by. So for instance, I think it was Anne Lasik had a bunch of slides that she, you know, didn't even have anything to look at them, but her husband talked her into donating them to the collection. And so when we went through those slides, she had some wonderful slides of skating on the houses on Main Street, you know, in the little lakes that would form in January or something, and, you know, we were able to use that in an exhibit on skating in Hatfield. But also, so I think in like Joe Pacheski donated his slides that were taken in the 70s, I think, of all different stages of tobacco growing and harvesting. But those things take a little more work on the part of the donor and also on the part of the receiving institution. Same thing for like VHS. There's someone in this room who has a tape of interviews about and video of tobacco harvesting that needs to get from VHS onto something that we can show.
Yeah. There's capturing history is hard, and it's amazing that you're all part of it. But that transfer process of how do we get the bits of story and keep the bits of story, and transfer it into a media that we can share going forward. It's a whole actual work. I know I'm running over time, and I could stay here, but I also don't want to keep you all. But there's one piece I do think that's important to say at this juncture when you ask about what we can hold and think about what we have. I'd always rather have a really nice picture of someone doing something in ways. Tell me the story of the thing. As Bob mentioned, I'm also the volunteer curator up in Greenfield, and we've had to say, please, thank you. We cannot accept a single other piece of woolen uniform, military uniform. We just can't. Please give us a picture of your grandfather in uniform. Please tell us what your grandmother did afterward. Please, anything. We cannot responsibly accept any more woolen uniforms in Greenfield. So it puts me really in mind of how we catch that history and how we carry those stories forward in a respectful manner. And this allows us to at least know what we have already so that we can continue to do that. All right, we good? Come and see the museum. Email me. We'll set up a time. It'll be great. Thank you so much.